The Widow of Darke Hollow. Written by Ethan Blackwood and narrated by Sebastian Wolfe. The town of Darke Hollow, nestled in a valley surrounded by shadowy forests and ancient cobblestone roads, seemed to be a relic of the Victorian era. The town's eerie atmosphere was amplified by the looming presence of Blackthorn Manor, an imposing structure perched atop a hill, casting its dark shadow over the town below. In this unsettling setting lived a widow of sombre countenance and melancholic disposition, Lady Isabella Oakley. Her days were spent within the decaying walls of her manor, hidden from the prying eyes of the curious townsfolk. Lady Oakley was a woman of great beauty, yet her visage bore the mark of tragedy. Her once lustrous raven hair had faded to a dull ashen hue, and her once rosy cheeks were now gaunt and hollow, a testament to the toll that grief had taken on her. Her eyes, which sparkled like the brightest amethysts in her youth, now darkened with the weight of grief. The loss of her beloved husband, Lord Archibald Oakley, in a tragic carriage accident, had consumed her, leaving her a shell of her former self. 3 years had passed since Lord Oakley's untimely demise, and the townsfolk gradually ceased their whispered speculations about the widow's reclusive nature. Still, Darke Hollow could not shake the sense of unease that clung to the air, as thick as the fog that rolled in each evening. On a fog-shrouded night, as the wind howled mournfully and the branches of the trees scraped against the manor's windows, Lady Oakley first heard an eerie tapping at the chamber door. The tapping had a distinct rhythm, like a heartbeat, that sent shivers down her spine. Her heart pounding, she approached the door with a mix of anxiety and curiosity. The tapping grew more persistent, unnerving her further. Pressing her ear against the cold wooden surface, she listened intently. The tapping ceased, leaving only the sound of her own unnerved breathing. Dismissing the tapping as a branch swaying in the wind, Lady Oakley returned to her chair by the fire, pulling her tattered shawl around her shoulders. She picked up her violin, hoping the melancholy strains of her music would distract her from the unsettling tapping. Over the following nights the tapping returned, each time seeming more insistent than the last. Despite her growing trepidation, Lady Oakley became consumed by a strange, inexplicable fascination with the unseen visitor. Her sleep grew restless, and her mind raced with thoughts of the mysterious tapping. Could it be the restless spirit of my husband, seeking solace in these grief-stricken halls? She pondered, her fingers trembling as her violin wept its mournful tune. She recalled the love they shared, the laughter that once filled the manor, and the emptiness that now haunted its halls. Desperation and longing for his presence filled her heart. Her curiosity piqued. She finally decided to confront whatever it was that haunted her nights. Gathering her courage, she flung open the chamber door, revealing a tall, shadowy figure, shrouded in fog. "Who are you?" Lady Oakley asked, her voice wavering with the weight of her dread. "Why have you come to this house of mourning?" The figure stepped forward, emerging from the veil of fog like a spectre. Its eyes were pools of inky darkness, and its voice seemed to resonate with 1,000 whispers when it spoke. "Your husband, Lord Archibald Oakley, did not perish by accident as you have been led to believe," it began, its words a cold knife in Lady Oakley's heart. "He was murdered, and his death was no random act of violence." A shudder ran through Lady Oakley's frame as she absorbed the impact of this revelation. All these years she had clung to the belief that her husband's death had been a cruel twist of fate, the result of a tragic carriage accident. Now she was forced to confront the reality that someone had wanted him dead. "But who would commit such a heinous act?" Lady Oakley whispered, her mind racing with the identities of those who might have harbored ill will towards her husband. The figure's voice took on a sinister tone as it revealed the next piece of the dark puzzle. "The person responsible for Lord Oakley's demise was none other than someone you held dear, your beloved cousin Rosamond." The name struck Lady Oakley like a blow, her hand flying to her mouth in a futile attempt to stifle a sob. Rosamond, her childhood confidant, her closest friend, and the woman who had stood at her side on her wedding day, had plotted her husband's murder. The thought was too monstrous, too repulsive to bear. As the figure spoke, Lady Oakley's mind raced with memories of her past with Rosamond. She recalled her cousin's veiled glances at Lord Oakley during their courtship, and the bitterness that had crept into her voice whenever she spoke of their impending marriage. The figure's words rang true, and Lady Oakley's heart ached with the weight of this revelation. "No," she choked out, shaking her head in denial. "You lie. Rosamond would never commit such an unspeakable crime. She loved my husband as a brother." The figure's eyes gleamed with an unsavory delight as it continued. "Ah, but that is where you are mistaken, dear Isabella. Rosamond's love for your husband was not that of a sister, but that of a woman scorned. She desired him for herself, and when he chose you, her heart festered with jealousy until it poisoned her very soul." "But how do you know all this?" she demanded, her voice trembling with raw emotion. "Who are you, truly?" The figure drew itself up to its full height, its cloak billowing around it like the wings of a raven. "I am the embodiment of the secrets you have sought to suppress, the echo of the past that refuses to be silenced. I exist to remind you of the price of ignorance, and the danger that lies in trusting those who would deceive you." With that, the figure vanished as suddenly and mysteriously as it had appeared, leaving Lady Oakley alone in the darkness, her heart shattering like glass beneath the weight of her newfound grief. She sank to her knees, a litany of despairing sobs escaping her lips as she came to terms with the terrible knowledge she had been given. The air in Darke Hollow grew colder, and the shadows in the manor seemed to deepen, as if in silent recognition of the darkness that had been unleashed. Lady Isabella Oakley would never again know the solace of ignorance, for the truth had come to claim her, and there would be no escaping its cold embrace. In the days that followed, Lady Oakley scarcely left her chamber, consumed by the terrible truth that had been thrust upon her. Her once beautiful manor became a prison of her own making, filled with memories of happier times, and the laughter of her treacherous cousin, now tainted by the revelation of her dark deeds. The townsfolk of Darke Hollow could not help but notice the change in the atmosphere of the manor, though they remained ignorant of the cause. Whispers spread like wildfire, and fearful glances were cast towards the imposing structure, shrouded in an air of mystery and doom. Lady Oakley, in her solitude, overheard their gossip and felt her isolation grow deeper, fueling her desire for vengeance. As night fell upon the manor, Lady Oakley began to search in earnest for a way to avenge her husband's murder and bring Rosamond to justice. She pored over the dusty tomes in her late husband's library, seeking knowledge of the arcane that might prove the key to her vengeance. Deep within the bowels of the library, Lady Oakley discovered a hidden chamber, its entrance concealed behind a false bookshelf. It was there that she found the instrument of her retribution, an ancient grimoire, its pages filled with intricate incantations and rituals dedicated to summoning the forces of darkness. These dark arts were not to be trifled with, Lady Oakley knew, but the burning desire for vengeance that consumed her left no room for fear. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the pages of the grimoire as she weighed the consequences of her actions. Ultimately, her thirst for justice overcame her trepidation, and she studied the grimoire with a feverish intensity, her fingers tracing the intricate symbols and runes that adorned its pages, until at last she felt ready to perform the ritual that would bring Rosamond to account for her heinous betrayal. The ritual scene was fraught with tension, as Lady Oakley prepared to unleash the dark forces she had summoned. The air in the hidden chamber was cold and heavy, the flickering candlelight casting eerie shadows on the walls. Lady Oakley's heart pounded in her ears, drowning out the distant rumble of thunder outside. She knew that her actions could have dire consequences, not only for Rosamond, but also for herself. Yet her thirst for vengeance overcame her fear, and she resolved to see her plan through to its bitter end. On a moonless night, cloaked in darkness and secrecy, Lady Oakley set the stage for the culmination of her sinister plan. She drew a circle of salt upon the floor of the hidden chamber, recalling the passage from the grimoire that explained its significance as a barrier against malevolent forces. At its center, she placed a silver chalice filled with her own blood, a symbol of the sacrifice she was willing to make for her vengeance. The air grew heavy with the scent of impending doom as she began to chant the words of the incantation, her voice rising to a fervent crescendo. A sudden gust of wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the candles that lined the walls, and leaving Lady Oakley shrouded in darkness. A flash of lightning illuminated the room for a brief moment, revealing the figure of the messenger standing at the edge of the circle. "You have summoned me once more, Lady Oakley," it intoned, its voice echoing like the whisper of 1,000 souls. "What is it you seek?" "I demand justice," she replied, her voice steady despite the terror that clawed at her heart. "I seek the power to bring my cousin Rosamond to account for her treachery and the murder of my husband." The figure regarded her with its dark, inscrutable gaze, its eyes reflecting the tempest that raged outside the chamber. "So be it," it said at last, extending its hand towards the chalice filled with her blood. "The price has been paid, and your vengeance shall be granted. But remember, Lady Oakley, that the forces you have unleashed cannot be tamed, and the darkness you have called forth shall consume you as well." As the figure vanished once more into the shadows, Lady Oakley knew that she had sealed her fate. Her hands shook, and her breath caught in her throat as she contemplated the consequences of her actions. Yet she could not bring herself to regret her choice, for the fire of her vengeance burned too brightly to be quenched by the shadows that encroached upon her soul. The day of reckoning arrived, and Lady Oakley, armed with the knowledge and power she had gained from the grimoire, confronted her treacherous cousin in the dimly lit drawing-room of the manor. Rosamond, unaware of the dark forces that had been unleashed, was taken aback by the fury in Lady Oakley's eyes. "Rosamond," Lady Oakley said, her voice cold and unwavering, "you stand accused of the murder of my husband, Lord Archibald Oakley. How do you plead?" Rosamond's eyes widened in shock, her face paling as she stammered, "Isabella, I don't know what you're talking about. I would never harm Archibald." "Do not lie to me," Lady Oakley roared, her anger boiling over. "I know the truth, and I will see you pay for your betrayal." As the storm outside raged, Lady Oakley hesitated for a moment, her heart heavy with the knowledge of the dark power she was about to unleash. But her resolve hardened, and she summoned the shadows that enveloped Rosamond. The treacherous cousin screamed in terror and pain, her eyes wide with horror as she realized her fate. The sound of her bones, cracking under the force of the shadows, filled the room. When the shadows finally receded, Rosamond lay lifeless on the floor, her body twisted and broken by the forces that had been unleashed upon her. Lady Oakley stared down at her cousin's lifeless form, her heart heavy with the knowledge that her vengeance had been exacted, but at a terrible cost. The manor, once a symbol of love and happiness, now stood as a monument to the darkness that had consumed its inhabitants. The townsfolk of Darke Hollow whispered of the cursed widow and the terrible fate that had befallen her family, but none dared to venture near the imposing structure that loomed over their once peaceful town. The once thriving community became a place of fear and superstition, with families moving away and businesses closing down. And so, Lady Isabella Oakley remained, a prisoner of her own making, trapped within the walls of her cursed manor, forever haunted by the shadows of her past and the terrible price she had paid for her vengeance. As she gazed out of the window, her eyes filled with the emptiness of her once happy life, she whispered a final prayer to the darkness, hoping for a reprieve from the torment that had become her existence.